Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. It is reasonable to expect that conflict at work will be part of your reality, part of everyone's reality at some point. So it's important to address it rather than avoid it. Conflict is not necessarily something that many people want to deal with or feel comfortable dealing with or are good at dealing with, but conflict will happen. You put together two human beings, at some point they may very well disagree, and conflict may be the result of that. So why not get ahead of the issue by talking about conflict and potential ways of resolving it? What are some of the more common workplace conflicts? It could be anything from work to personality to choices of resources or availability of resources to what office or workstation someone has. Personalities can play a big role in that, because even if conflict arises in different areas, one's personality will contribute to how that conflict plays out or doesn't play out. Some people are simply more confrontational. Others are very much less confrontational. But no matter how you look at conflict, it's bound to exist when people come together, and that is also true for the workplace. Today, we will look at conflict prevention and resolution. When it comes to conflict, anything can trigger it, from lack of sleep to too much stress, to miscommunication, to expectations, to personalities. Absolutely anything can trigger conflict for many people. It's important to be able to identify some of the more common triggers for conflict within an organization and then proactively do something about it. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Conflict is something that deserves and requires the time and the recognition of individuals at all levels within the organization. All too often, managers are either overly engaged to the point of micromanaging, or so removed that they believe all conflict will resolve itself without any third-party intervention or without any kind of training of what to do about conflict. Unfortunately, left to one's own devices, that could be a hit or miss as far as successful conflict resolution. So why would an employer leave that to chance when there are actual things that can help to reduce conflict within an organization, within a team, but also that can help the team to become more cohesive, bring them closer together, therefore not being prone to conflict or not being as affected by conflict as they may otherwise have been. clear rules, clear boundaries, clear goals, clear expectations. Those are the types of things that can help to prevent conflict at work. Clear assignments of tasks and responsibilities are truly up there. You would be surprised how many employers have in the past promised the same position to multiple people, to multiple new hires or existing employees, only for them to find out that it was a ruse in order to have the company achieve one thing or another. The other component is leadership or management. They absolutely have to lead by example. If your manager or the organization's leaders handle conflict well, by conducting themselves in a certain way, by getting to the bottom of things, by fixing things, then that gives off a different experience, both for the employee, for the vendor, the customer, and even the public, than if you are a company where conflict is the word of the day every day and nothing really gets done. There is no innovation. There are no new things that are coming online because there is internal conflict that's stopping all the progress. When a manager, when a leader has to play referee all the time, they will likely not have the time, effort, and energy for other things that could have otherwise been used to help the company grow and advance. As I already mentioned, communication is key, and it has to be communication that flows in both directions between employee and employer. With communications, of course, come the ample opportunities of being on the same page, and that is critical. If a company has one set of expectations, but an employer interprets them as something else or understands them as something else, probably from other employees, that can potentially be very harmful, very detrimental. Of course, it's always a good idea for classes, for training, to be part of the working experience, and in this instance I'm talking about conflict resolution training, whether that's training for management only, whether that's training for the general population of the workforce. Whatever you can get into your company will probably be a lot more beneficial than what you have now, which may very well be little to nothing on terms of work conflict resolution. Leaders and managers have a unique opportunity to truly showcase their own behavior, their mastery of conflict resolution, whether that's conflict with them and another person, whether that's conflict that they witness or have to manage, or whether that's conflict that was part of your life for a short period of time. But rather than dwelling on any of this, the true benefit lies in simply doing the next right thing. And while communications and goals, clear goals, are very important, the other thing that's also important to consider are team building activities. Some, of course, are better than others, some are more successful than others, but as a leader, as a manager, as someone who wants to see team building within the organization, within your team, raise your hand and speak up. Ask for some team building events or exercises or things you can participate in. Besides having official training, and besides having open and honest communications, the other thing that's important is building teams. When we have strong bonds with people on our team, we are much less likely to get into conflict and much quicker to resolve any conflict that does arise. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Conflict is inevitable, especially when you put a number of people together and ask them to accomplish something, regardless of whether conflict is a matter of personalities or tasks and responsibilities, or simply not having the right communication or lacking clarity. Whatever the cause, conflict at work does not have to be the way of life. It can definitely be reduced and even eliminated altogether. But remember, it does require work. It requires communication. It requires identifying where the conflict is and what needs to be done. In other words, it requires proactivity, whether that's from management, leadership, or even from your employees. You can do the self-assessment and think about it without having to put anything on paper, without having to reveal any score. How do you fit into all this? Where do you fall? If there were a spectrum against which you could measure yourself, how would you do? How would you do with conflict? Do you seek out conflict? Do you avoid it? When conflict finds you, how quickly do you resolve it? So think about those things. As this week unfolds, I invite you to consider conflict in your workplace. Are you part of the conflict? Are you witnessing it? Are you causing it? Are you always trying to fix things and, in essence, take on somebody else's conflict, make it your burden? Where could you do better? Are you someone who tends to be part of the problem? Are you someone who genuinely looks for resolution? So think about conflict in your own workplace, in your own experience, and where and how could you improve on your relationship with conflict so that it can then affect the rest of the organization. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.